As we continue practicing teaching in the Savior's way by loving those you teach, this week we're going to work on seeing learners the way God sees them. In our classroom, when we ask a question, such as, "I'd love to know what you and your families do to keep the Sabbath day holy," we might get a response that we don't expect. Well, my family likes to watch sports on Sunday. We do things like baseball, basketball, soccer. Now, if you as the teacher feel that this is not an appropriate way to keep the Sabbath day holy, you might not be quite sure how to respond. Let's take some counsel from the teacher development skills from the church's website. Every student comes to class with different life experiences and relationships that shape the way they think and feel about gospel truths. These views create a starting point, often called a premise, for an individual's thinking. Identifying an individual's premise can help us teach truth with empathy and love as Jesus Christ does. Different premises do not change the doctrine. Rather, they allow us to see another person's perspective in a way that helps increase our understanding of each learner's needs, to, in turn, increase faith in Jesus Christ. Coming to that understanding will be our goal this week. Look at this great cartoon about international arrivals at an airport. Each person comes from a different background and has different premises or expectations about how a greeting should be performed. Here it leads to great confusion. But it's not just our background and experiences that affect how we perceive things. We also all have different personality temperaments. Notice these three. They're listening to the same proposal of goals from a board meeting, but their responses are very different. Nothing could go wrong. Number 2 says, there may be a glitch or two. And number 3 sometimes is more like myself. First the oceans will rise, then the sky will fall. These perspectives all come from the very same bit of information. And personality temperaments aren't all either. Sometimes it's just the day or what happened before they came to class, what they're worried about later in the day. So if we get a question or a comment that we're not quite sure how to respond to, consider asking a couple of questions. How might the experiences and relationships of my students shape the way they think about, feel about, and live these truths? And also, as we study this truth, could any of my students feel excluded, troubled, or hurt because of their circumstances? We can think about that both in class and while we're preparing for class. Remember that the premises do not change the doctrine. But what we're looking for is how we can help to increase our understanding of each learner's needs so that we can increase their faith in Jesus Christ. Back to this situation from our opening scenario. How might we respond with understanding? One possibility is, "Thank you for sharing that. I can tell that really means a lot to you." But depending on the needs of our student, we might feel inspired to challenge them to dig a little deeper. For example, we might say, "Tell me more about how those experiences help you get more out of your Sabbath day." The response from our students might surprise us. Let's focus on these principles of understanding as we prepare the lesson for today. In our lesson for Matthew chapter 14 and John chapter 6, we'll be talking about the miraculous feeding of the 5,000. The lesson manual proposes 2 scenarios and then gives a short lesson plan for each one. The first one includes concepts about dealing with tragedy like death. And the second talks about how we deal with the challenges of feeling overwhelmed when called to serve. The call-out box right above these scenarios will give us some great insight and direction that can help us as we think about how we can look at each learner's needs. The scenarios below correspond with two different principles taught in the Savior's feeding of the 5,000. Consider students' needs and determine if it's best to study one principle as a class or if students would benefit from studying a principle of their choosing, individually or in small groups. And then mentions that separate study activities are available for each. So, as you decide how you would approach your lesson preparation, think about the student's needs. What do you know about a student's relationships or experiences that would affect the way they think about or understand the doctrines you're going to teach today? And are there things in the principles that will be taught that might trouble or hurt a student because of past experiences? Be sensitive to that too. The Lord can and will inspire you with ways that you can better meet the needs of your students to help them to understand these truths and come closer to Jesus Christ.